Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the About Circus podcast. My name is Kerttu, and in this episode, our guest is Onni Toivonen. Hello,
Hi.
Onni.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. You are kind of rushed today. Normally, we always wine and dine our guests.
Okay.
We take them out for lunch and we hang out and stuff.
Well, we've had lunch several times
We
before,
have had several. We can acknowledge that to the
our whole
audience.
friendship up to this point has actually just been warming up to this moment.
Exactly. 100 million coffees talking about art.
Yeah. All warm up.
Yeah, so actually I spoke about this a bit with Miradonna in the last episode, that one of the goals for the podcast has been to also talk to people that we don't talk to about this stuff normally. But you and I talk about this stuff normally.
Yeah.
And maybe that's interesting for the audience to know that this conversation isn't a one-off. It's kind of building on a longer, almost.
It's like one of our hobbies.
One of our hobbies, yeah, as friends, and also maybe artistic collaborators to a certain extent.
For sure.
But yeah, let's get started. I want to start with the same question I have been asking everybody at this point as the first question, which is, what do you call yourself? How do you identify?
I identify as a juggler, a circus artist and a juggler. And then, maybe when I was younger, if I had been braver, I would have written mover into my Instagram bio at some point. But juggler primarily, that's my most important identity.
Why do you say when you were younger? Would you now not write mover into your Instagram
I think
bio?
now it's just kind of like a meme at this point,
right.
Now I'm kind of on the other side of that. I see young jugglers put mover into their bio and I'm almost like, just call yourself a juggler.
Right.
Because juggling includes moving. It's fine. You don't need to be cooler.
Okay, great.
Put mover into
I
it.
love it. We're already in the gist of the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
1 minute in. I'm really curious about this juggler identity question, because I think it's one of the few disciplines in circus that actually differentiates in that type of way. There isn't really another discipline within circus that people would identify with that before being a circus artist.
Sure.
Like an aerialist, if you say, how do you identify? They wouldn't say, I identify as an aerialist. They would say, I'm a circus artist who does aerials.
Sure.
But in jugglers, I find often that the primary, that they say first, I'm a juggler, and then they give the context kind of afterwards. Do you have any kind of opinion or idea about why that is? Or why is it for you, maybe?
Well, juggling kind of exists as a big hobbyist thing, really outside of circus already. So definitely a lot of professional jugglers who end up being circus artists, they start off as hobbyist jugglers and not necessarily in a youth circus where you would learn trapeze or trampoline or other things like that. So they identify as jugglers first, and then they're like, well, I want to do this professionally. And then just for historical reasons, they end up in a circus school but I feel like it's much more common for an aerialist to be first in a youth circus and then go to a circus school to become a professional. So they are, from the very beginning, identifying as a circus artist, working in a circus context.
Yeah, actually, now that you said that.
That's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
But I do think that juggling is, I don't think juggling necessarily has to be in the context of circus. I see it as if history had gone a little bit differently, because, the first, Philip Astley collecting the first artists to the first circus, it wasn't obvious who ends up there and who ends up on the outside of that. Or why do we have some disciplines there and some outside of it? And then if history had gone a little bit different, then maybe I think juggling or object art could exist separately or more separately from the circus context.
Yeah, historically, I think there have been jugglers who have been world famous just for being jugglers.
Yeah.
Kind of outside of the circus context. And so historically, I think that's a really good point. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is somehow the practice of juggling isn't necessarily a choice in a similar way than other disciplines are.
In what way?
Like that if you have the capacity, the brain capacity for it, you have it or you don't have it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Like you have to kind of have a specific kind of brain to like be able to juggle the amount that you need to juggle to like be good at juggling. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like that kind of applies to a lot of other disciplines too, that like the best people at any given discipline are like kind of weird in a way. And they're like a special kind of dude or lady or anything in between. So, and also I think what contributes to a separate identity within circus for jugglers is also that juggling is physical in a very different way than a lot of circus disciplines. It's kind of like magic, you know, like magic is very adjacent to circus, but it exists outside of circus as well. There's just like magic shows and there's new magic and things like that. Not all magicians work in a circus. And then like juggling could be something like that. But then also in a circus school, when you're there, the jugglers are kind of like the odd ones out. They're the nerds in the corner who are like often physical in a very different way. They're often like less athletic and more brainy or like, I guess often more like, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
but
I think
you
like
just feel different in a circus school.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like our audience of listeners, if they're interested in this podcast, they know circus enough to understand what you're talking about this like certain outsiderness in the context of like most circus schools still are places where you are training like high achieving acrobats. And then jugglers don't always, you know, of course there are jugglers who are both. You're also an acrobat and a mover. But I was thinking about this, like, when does the choice of becoming a juggler happen? And off the top of my head, I could only think of one person that I know who has chosen to become a juggler after they were already something else in the circus.
Right.
Which is Natasha Patterson.
Really?
She was first a contortionist.
Oh, okay.
And then started juggling afterwards. But other
she was still really young at the time.
She was really young,
yeah.
She was a kid. But she was in the circus context, like doing something else. And then decided that she wanted to juggle. But I know lots of people who came to circus school without a discipline and were like, oh, I'm going to do Chinese pole. Oh, I'm going to do Roussier. I don't know anyone who came into circus school without a discipline and became a juggler.
Right, yeah, that's true. I can't think of. But I know some people who kind of like juggling and then like try to make it work and were like, oh, this requires a different brain than I have. And it felt like banging their head on the wall instead of fun to learn how to juggle, and then they would go on to do another circus discipline and get really good at that because it just like works differently. Somehow.
But to continue from this on to the next level of the conversation, what is that for you? Like for you personally, why do you feel that identity so closely?
Well, my primary craft is juggling, toss juggling. More specifically, club juggling is where I feel like I've spent the most time doing it. I have like the most relevant contributions to the development of the technique, and that's kind of like the foundation of all. Even when I work with other objects, or even when I apply my sort of thinking to other disciplines or moments or instances, I feel like that's where I kind of draw from. That's the foundation of all the physical activity I do in a way in circus. And I just feel like I really like juggling as an art form. I find it, to me, it's like a separate thing from circus. I have had the most profound art experiences in my life have been with juggling specifically. And then I feel like what I want to do as an artist is to contribute specifically to that continuum, that like historic development of juggling as an art form. And I also find it, you know, like a couple of generations before the first, or I don't know, like my greatest heroes in circus and juggling are also people who identify very strongly as jugglers and care deeply about juggling specifically. And then, yeah, I also, when I make art, it's always like through objects. My process is very object driven, and I'm kind of lost if I don't have an object that I can apply my juggling thinking to. If I find myself in a moment like that, I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do, because everything that I do is like flowing from the object. So then even when I'm not doing necessarily tosh juggling, and I'm like right now I'm working on a piece with a dancer where we have like two big hooks, and then we're like kind of hooking each other, and it's nothing like, it's not juggling, it's not tosh juggling, but I can do it, and I find it interesting and relevant because I can apply my object's art thinking to that process.
Your lens.
Yeah. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's move back in time a little bit.
Sure.
You grew up in youth circus here in Tampere, like I did. We did together. And then you went to school in DOC in Stockholm. And since then, after your graduation, you've spent quite a lot of time working as a juggler and a performer for other companies, for Nuan, from Aero, and you worked with some dance companies as well. You've worked with Racehorse Company. And then you made your first kind of own production, Amalgam. Is that true? Was your first one that you...
It was my kind of directorial debut.
Yeah.
I had done a lot of smaller things, but like the first that I could say was like a full-length show for a theater.
Yeah.
Was definitely
And that
Amalgam.
was which year?
2019 was the official premiere, but for me, the show was done in 2020, to be honest.
Yeah. And then since then you have done Stygian, which is your most recent like solo work with your musician colleague, with Konsta. And now you're working on a new piece as we speak.
Yeah.
So you are kind of one of these like, to contextually place you in a way, you don't have your own company that you would be the artistic director of. And you work both for other people and in commercial context, and then you also have your own artistic practice like on the side, and you kind of exist in a hybrid within the industry.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, it's I founded my own company in 2023 with Konsta, but it was more like we founded a brand instead of like an association in a legal sense.
Yeah.
And we're collaborating with company Nua and with Olli, who handles kind of the administrative side of things, which is like a super awesome deal that he's willing to support us in that way. So when I'm creating with Konsta specifically, like the two of us, we're kind of like Armor Circus Works.
Yeah.
And that's just like a brand. But yeah, I found it difficult to dive full into having my own company and like trying to get the operational support and like try to play this game of trying to establish myself as that.
Yeah.
I also, because Olli has been like so supportive, and company Nua is like, I can do things under their name also and with him. Like Amalgam was produced by company Nua, for example, and that was awesome. So I don't have to concern myself with that side of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty big like advantage to you in a way, because a lot of the time, in order for people to get to do their own work, they also need to do all the production work. But then it liberates some amount of time for you to just focus on the actual practice rather than the practicalities of like paying taxes. Although I'm sure you have to deal with that as well, but not to the extent that if you run your own association.
Yeah, and I perform a lot for other companies, and I do, like now I was in a dinner show for half a year.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would just completely die if I had to do like work for others and run my own company and create at the same time, like have my own artistic practice. And like I'm already overwhelmed as is.
Yeah.
So then if I had a company, I think I don't know. I'm just so blessed to have Nua and Olli, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
Awesome.
It is really great, and we should be grateful in general for people who like want to mentor us or help us, or producers who want to back us. Like it's really,
Absolutely.
really, really important.
And also, I think if I were to found my own company now and try to apply for operational support, like the pie is getting smaller.
Yeah.
We're living in an era of art like cuts to the cultural sector and austerity and all these things. And I feel like if I were to found my own company and apply for operational support, maybe get it in a couple of years, then it would be less money for other people doing the same. And then also I would just have an increased workload trying to make my thing bigger.
Yeah.
But there's already so many small companies in Finland.
Yeah.
Like, why not just collaborate and try to have like good like deals and, you know, this kind of, I think it's like a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Yeah.
Because I do a dope show, you know, Olli gets to tick a box that Nua had a premiere this year.
Yeah.
And a lot of people saw the show and so on and so forth. So then Nua's activity levels rise a lot, and that's really good for them.
Yeah, I think.
And then I get to make a show.
Yeah, and focus on the thing that you're good at.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that we ended up talking about this now, because in the podcast in general, I've tried to really like steer away from production and politics as a part of the conversation. That we like try to stick to just the art stuff.
We don't have to keep the same.
No. But it's like really interesting that you and I, as people, like end up on these art conversations really often, and now on a podcast we're talking about politics.
Yeah.
But no, I think it is relevant. Like how your work is kind of framed in the world is relevant. And let's say in comparison to the other people that I have interviewed, Armas and Miradonna, they both have their own associations, and they are both also the chairman, or like they're running their own associations the same way that I am. So it is interesting to see also how your kind of more free agent status affects the way that you make work. And I would argue, actually, based on what you just told me, that the reason why you identify as a juggler primarily is because that is the title that sticks with you through all of those different places.
Yeah.
Like in a dinner show, you're still a juggler.
Yeah.
And in working for somebody else directing you, you're still a juggler. And that's why, you know, you don't have to so much have this conversation that me and Miradonna and Armas had about like, what do you call yourself? And all of us at that point said like, oh, we call ourselves like cultural facilitators, or that's not the right word.
Kind of like more broad terms.
Yeah.
Where I'm like lasered in on like, I'm a juggler.
Exactly. And I love that variety.
I'm juggling.
Yeah. I love that variety of this like kind of discipline and I don't want to say technique focused, but like practice focused.
Yeah,
making.
craft. Practice
exactly.
Focused.
Exactly. But to get back to my pre-planned questions, there's something that I have been asking other people as well about their education in relation to what they do now, because circus education is an interesting topic to kind of consider how it affects us as artists, where we went to school and who taught us. Is there something in your education at DOG, specifically as a juggler, that you feel like still impacts how you make shows, or how do you juggle today? Could you tell us about those things?
Sure. My years in DOC were definitely very formative for my artistic life. I was there from 2013 to 2016. My juggling professor was Jay Gilligan. His teachings have been very formative for my artistic life. His whole thing is being very conscious about the juggling that you do and making conscious choices and being able to articulate your choices. He definitely taught me a lot about how to find tricks, how to make a good sequence, how to what is juggling to begin with. We kind of start from the very ground floor and find a common vocabulary about what is juggling even, so that we know what we're talking about. And I definitely learned a lot. It's so hard to like say in
Yeah.
a concise manner what I learned, but I definitely learned so much from him. He's like a very profound thinker and doer, I think, in the juggling world, and his contributions are massive.
Yeah.
And I feel like what my real like kind of schooling was that I got like an idea or like a philosophy or a way of thinking, a method or whatever from Jay, or as far as I was able to grasp it from Jay in school. And then after that, I went to work for Koara, for example,
Yeah.
and I noticed that the way that they worked also conflicted with how Jay thought. And then I kind of had to like figure out what to keep and what not, and what to discard, and like this kind of like conflict of having this thing. And I think it's really cool that Jay has like, this is how I think about juggling. He has a philosophy that makes sense.
Yeah.
And even if you find it to have its limitations, or like maybe you want to do something different, I think it's really such a valuable thing to give to a student, is like a coherent philosophy that makes sense, instead of kind of saying like, oh, anything is fine, or like any way to think about juggling is fine, or like equally good, or whatever. He gave me a way to think, and then I had to like make that make sense in the world, and working with other artists and other directors and stuff like that.
I think that's quite unique, actually, to have had an education where somebody actually teaches you a method of making.
Yeah.
Because a big part of the reason why this podcast even exists is because we have found in our practice and into talking to other people that we were never taught a method on how to make circus.
Right.
And then we kind of invent our own, and it's this like almost unspoken thing that how does it actually happen? Like, what do you do? Where do you get your ideas, and how do you refine them?
It's like a very intuitive, of mysterious process.
Exactly. And I would have loved to have a teacher who would have been like, I have a method and I'm going to teach it to you.
Yeah.
And to have that as a building block.
And also what Jay also doesn't like necessarily tell you how to create, but he's also like, you have kind of like a very intuitive, mysterious process when you go to circus school. Like, you make sequences and you make juggling, you make an act and stuff, but then Jay's there and he's like, why did you do that? Why did you put that trick after that trick? So then when you have to articulate it time after time, you kind of like make sense of it to yourself through the 3 years, like you learn how your intuitive process becomes a conscious process. And then you can do with that whatever you want. Maybe you can like really look at your process and be like, well, that doesn't work, or that doesn't provide the results that I want, so I have to change my process. But now I'm aware of my process.
Or doesn't do it consistently.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I find with this intuitiveness is that you can, then the work is almost like, how do you get yourself to an intuitive state where something comes out?
Yeah.
And if you make things for a living, it is almost more sustainable to not have to rely on an intuitive vibe, because it may not always be there, but you still have to make stuff.
Right. I find it to be good to be able to do both.
Yeah.
Because intuition is it's quick and it's often right, and it's such a good tool to have, and it develops over the years, of course. Like, a really good chef who's been cooking for 30 years has a really good intuition about how to make a good soup out of random ingredients or something. So the same happens with a circus artist, but then it's also good to, like, when you're uninspired, when you're not in the mood, to just be like, okay, well, I gotta crank out something that works, and I know how.
Yeah.
And then you can just do it.
I wonder how, I would love to, I think I'm gonna add this as a question for the future podcasts, to talk to people very specifically about the relationship of like planned, like organized making versus intuitive making, and how I think it's actually a pretty high value skill to be able to do both. I have this intuition, let's say, or this assumption that many creative people have one track. Like, I make either fully planned or I make fully intuitively. But in order to be able to actually like fluctuate between both is a skill. And very many good creatives that I know have that skill. That they're able to kind of pick and choose which bucket they're drawing from.
Yeah.
Adam has this great quote, I'm trying to remember what it is, that there are makers who are architects and makers who are gardeners.
Yeah.
And it's like two different types. And within our collaboration, I'm an architect and he's a gardener. And then we have to kind of negotiate between the two methodologies. And I find that whenever I find places where I embrace the inner gardener, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, this feels really good. But I do have a tendency to want to do it like in my brain first and then execute.
Yeah.
But this leads us very nicely to the next question is about where your processes start.
Oh, well, that's easy. From the object.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my tool is my body and the objects that I'm working with. And then everything, the choice of object is the foundational choice, artistic choice. And then everything just kind of, in a very logical way, often just flows from there. For example, now I'm going to take an example from this new show that I'm working on with Olli Lautiola. Olli Lautiola. Great, I got his name wrong. We're making a new piece and we're working with these big wooden hooks, for example. So then, that's kind of like the main focus in the beginning of the show. Or usually I don't even start with like making a show necessarily. It's kind of like crazy for me to jump right into making a piece out of something because I like to do a lot of like base research with an object, focus on whatever the craft is, come up with a movement vocabulary with that object. What does it want to do? How does it interact with my body? How much does it weigh? Can I give weight to it? What's the color? What's the material? Can I balance it? Is it floppy or hard? Or, and then all of that informs the material that comes out of it. And then I look at the material and then usually it very naturally, some kind of an expression emerges from that. So I just try to kind of like be honest to what the object is and what the object wants to do. And then if I feel like if I do that process well, then I can just look at the material that I find and be like, well, that wants to be in this kind of a show, in this kind of a scene. And, this, or it gives me this kind of a feeling when I look at it. Maybe it's like really funny, or it's really beautiful, or it's really like difficult and like hard and slow or something. So that suggests, already kind of like a use case for what it is. Or like maybe what even the thematic or philosophical implications of a kind of interpretational horizon suggests itself, if you just are honest to the object.
And is that an intuitive process mostly when you first start with the object, that when you're searching for these like different textures, that at its core, that's first kind of like you freely with the object seeing where it goes without much of a expectation on
So yeah, for me it is intuitive. I just kind of like grab it and see what happens. But then quite quickly, if you find something and you're like, oh, now the hook flops from my like elbow and my armpit in a really cool way and it affects my body in that way, that's a thing. So then what do we do with this thing? Then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make 10 more things that are kind of like that, or like are kind of good or do the same thing.
Yeah.
Or are in the same category, and I try to like define the category as well. Like, oh, it's this like counterweight thing. So then I'm gonna do 10 counterweight tricks or moves or things that are like of a similar nature. And then that is kind of like often a little bit logical. Like it like you can really problem solve your way into doing 10 variations. But then the initial one and then why it felt good is, or something felt good is kind of like accidental or intuitive, how I get there. You're just like kind of like goofing around and then something happens and you're like, oh, what was that? Why was it cool? Can I do 10 more that are cool in that way?
And that I think is a perfect example of this like balancing between the intuitive practice of that comes from your body because of your previous practice, and then the ability to look back on it and go, what was it? why did I like it? Why did it feel good? And is it like replicatable?
Sure.
And then in that phase, you're kind of like going back and forth. Oh, I came up with this fun thing. I'm going to try to see where it goes. And then I'll go back to jamming and see what comes out of that. And then like kind of work in that sense.
Yeah.
Which is surprisingly difficult to do. I think just to like jam and find good things and be able to look back at them and replicate is actually like a skill that requires a lot of experience with objects.
Sure.
It seems simple now we say it out loud, but having tried it a couple of times as not a juggler, it's not. To actually execute it successfully is actually quite difficult.
Yeah, sure. And also like most of the stuff that comes out is not good. You know, like it's like you do 10 and then maybe if you're lucky 2 of them are good.
Yeah.
But the point is not to make good things. It's just to like try to exhaust the options or like try to, you know, explore every corner of that technique.
Yeah.
Or that particular dynamic in an object.
Yeah.
And that's also like makes it easier if you're like not judgmental while you do it. And the question is to only, the point is to do like 10 more things, and then kind of look at them after and be like, were they any good? You kind of just like have to make sure that they are within the category that you're working within.
But in the moment, you can't be questioning, are they good while you're doing them?
Oh, no, you just get stuck.
Yeah.
Or like it's not fun to be like, well, what was that? Was that good now? And then, whoa, you know, is this useful for the process? Just get too stressed.
Yeah, I have 2 like directions where I want to take this conversation, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to do both. Let's see. The first one is I want to take one step back and ask you about the object. You said that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And for you as a juggler of clubs, there's not a question about why you have clubs. You have clubs because you're a juggler.
Oh, I've asked that question so many times. Why on earth do I have clubs?
But then like this hook, for example, where did the hook come from?
Well, I kind of set certain standards for what the object have to be for this show, because I knew I was going to be working with a dancer. So I knew that I didn't want to too much toss juggling things, and I wanted the objects to be small enough to be juggled, but big enough and sturdy enough for us to be able to transfer force through them, or maybe give our weight to them. Because it's kind of like, okay, he's like a floor work and partnering guy, and partnering is a lot about giving weight. So I thought I want to have objects that kind of have a similar dynamic to a partnering partner, or like you can give weight to the object, or you can use the object to manipulate the other person, basically. And then the hooks were kind of like one of the many objects that I thought of and built, and now it looks like it's going to be the primary object of the show. It's like possibly just the hooks.
Yeah.
But that's where it was like I was like, oh, what kind of objects make sense for this kind of a show? Or like these ingredients that I have, or having the other dancing.
Yeah, you kind of answered the second question that I had, because I was wondering about this imagining something being a certain way in advance, and then making it match your expectation with objects, because like you imagined the hook because you had this project in mind.
Yeah.
It wasn't that you made up a hook because it would be fun to juggle with a hook and then it turned into the show. The show kind of existed as a concept, and the object was created for that show.
Sure.
In a way. And then it turned out that it worked the way that you were hoping it to work. But there was a level of like pre-imagining before you started the physical work.
Yeah, and that's not always the case though. Often I feel like now it's kind of rare because we have a show that we're doing right off the bat. We haven't collaborated before, so we're just like, well, let's make a show together. But I feel like often I have like an image or a mechanism. Like I'm like, I want an object that is kind of like a club. Like what if a club flopped around the other club? You know, that's just like a dynamic of an object.
Yeah.
Or like I saw somebody do like a dragon staff spin on their head, and I really liked that image. So I was like, oh, can I have that image but like longer and better? Or like, can I have an object that spins on the head? And then, yeah, there was like an initial idea. Like it wasn't just
That was an independent.
I wasn't just fucking around with a plank.
Yeah.
And then it started turning on my head, but I had an image in my head of like, I want something to spin on my head. What kind of an object can I spin on my head?
Yeah.
What would lend itself to that the best?
Yeah.
Or like the flopping around is another object that I built. I call them T-clubs. That they're like a stick with like a circular platform at the end, and then they kind of like hook on the stick of the other. They hook onto each other and they flop around the body of each other in a really fun way. And but I did have like a mechanism or a technique that I wanted to achieve before I built the object.
Yeah, because that is kind of this thing about the gardener and the architect metaphor, that I'm really interested in how people balance the I see something in my head and then I execute it.
Right.
Or I imagine that maybe this could be a thing. I'm interested in something and it could work like that. And then you get the object and it does work the way you thought. Mm-hmm. But it's never linear, really. But I'm just interested because you have such a strong emphasis on the physical practice that there still is an aspect of like some kind of pre-planning or imagining that's conceptual. Yeah. And then it gets transferred into a physical practice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you juggle for fun still?
Yeah, but I have to be like, I still enjoy juggling. I really like it feels physically good to do it. But obviously if I'm like working on a season and I'm juggling clubs at work every day, then if I juggle clubs, it's kind of like work, or like it's less easy to have fun with clubs because I'm maybe like thinking about, easily you kind of start thinking about work, or also I often feel like my neural pathways kind of get stuck over a long season where I just kind of like find myself unable to do any other tricks but the ones that I perform on stage with that specific object. So then I kind of have to have like a hobby object with me. So I have balls with me. So then I just juggle balls as a hobby if I want to have fun. And then when I go to work, I put the balls away and take the clubs out. And I'm like, I'm at work.
I want to stop at that like having fun thing, because it's really cool and interesting that you keep bringing that up. You said it in the beginning too, and I wrote it down for myself, fun ? Because it's interesting that you want to have fun. Like you want it to feel good, the thing that you are doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like directly fun, or like there's a wide range of ways that things can be fun.
Yeah.
Like, for example, now I'm referencing again this show that I'm doing with Onni. For example, there's a scene where we're like leaning onto each other with the hooks, and the hooks are around our necks, and it hurts.
Yeah.
But it's a cool image, and the pain is kind of fun. You know, like you can really feel the gravity. Yeah. In your body and in your neck, and it's like uncomfortable. But yeah, it's also like, I'm like, hell yeah, this is so cool. I definitely. Even if like I like having fun and I think juggling is fun and I probably like do it a lot because it feels fun. If juggling didn't feel fun, I think it would be really hard to just like continue doing it because of some sort of, you know, sense of responsibility to the art form or something. Yeah. Yeah. But also, I think juggling expression doesn't have to be only fun. Even if the process is fun, I think juggling shows have the capacity and like, you know, it can be anything. It can be sad, it can be like beautiful, it can be funny, it can be any anything in the human emotional range, you know. But the process can, like for me, it's important that the process is also fun.
Yeah. I think that is when you look at the result of the actual thing, it makes for very authentic performances. That you are deriving from a place of like, does this feel good? Is this fun? Was it like, even if enjoyment isn't necessarily the right word, like you're not performing things only because they feel good to do, you are performing them because of how they express. But I think if you're able to tap into some kind of like inner satisfaction, then that satisfaction does translate into what is being perceived from the audience.
I definitely like try to have all the moves in my shows be like I'm feeling it. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And then often, obviously, like through the process of creating a show and looking at the material, some days you're like, that's totally a thing, that's so cool. And then other days you look at the same thing and you're like, well, what was I thinking? That's not a thing. So it's like, it's an aspirational thing. Of course, I wish I could make a show where like I'm really feeling each and every move in the show every day.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
But just like thinking about comparing what we are talking about now, for example, to what we talked about with Miradonna last week, is that her practice is not focused on a physical object or like
physical practice.
Yeah, physical practice in the sense like it's more conceptual in its expression. And I think she even said in the interview that she like has kind of like that she used to feel very strongly about wanting to be like super intense technically, and then has walked back that down later, that she's not so interested in that and she's more interested in what the art says. I hope I'm not paraphrasing her now in a way that she wouldn't agree with, but I'm just trying to, that even within the realm of circus, it's very interesting that we have people like you who are like, this is the object and the practice and it's physical and it's based on sensations in my body, and that you are on a juggling contract doing clubs and you bring balls to juggle for fun.
Right.
Like that, it does speak to a level of like focus about you and the way that you express, rather than people like Miradonna. I would also argue like people like me who don't really have that like honed in physical practice that's based on our relationship to something physically, but rather like a general, oh, here's a thing I could do and here's a thing I could do.
Yeah.
And like, I often think after I stopped being an aerialist, how much more my nervous system had to adjust to not being upside down all the time.
Yeah.
And it's something like it's been probably like almost 8 years that I haven't actively done my original discipline. And it, like only a couple of years ago, I realized that like spinning and being upside down was a constant physical stimulus that I was getting to my body. And it took a really long time for me to understand that my whole like nervous system changed when I stopped.
Was it like a calming thing for you?
Yeah, I think it was a stim.
Sort of like freaking out when you weren't spun upside down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's really like in terms of juggling, I wonder in your future if there's ever going to be a point where you don't juggle anymore.
Yeah. So even if I like stopped doing juggling for a living, I think I would continue juggling as a form of functional meditation.
Yeah.
I feel like my nervous system and my brain works a lot better if I keep up with my practice of juggling. And then if not, I think I would definitely have to be doing qigong in the park or something like all day if I didn't juggle, for sure. But for me, I've been juggling since I was literally 5, and I'm still juggling and I'm still having fun. So I don't see why I would stop juggling even if I had a different career or a different life.
Yeah.
Somehow. I think it's just, like, it would be kind of sad to be like, oh, I'm never gonna like dance again, or like it's like a basic human thing to do, kind of.
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and it is kind of a part of your identity at this point.
Yeah, I think I would definitely have a massive identity crisis if I stopped juggling for some, or like if I couldn't juggle, I would freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow, I'm so glad that we kind of like got a little bit more deep into the how we make stuff part of it, because it's like what I want to talk about with this podcast, but it can sometimes take a little while to get into the gist of like what do you think about. I think we covered that quite well. There's one kind of last topic that I wanted to touch on, which is like the audience of juggling. And how juggling as a performance like belongs in the world, because within the circus industry there's a lot of people, like I'm sure you've heard these comments of like, I normally don't like juggling, but that was really good.
Oh yeah.
Like and because it's such a specific thing about how people read it, and it has these internal expectations of like how many objects are there is like equivalent to how good it is or something. When you make your pieces, especially when you like make shows, how much the audience's ideas or perceptions play into what you're making?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't feel like I'm actively imagining an audience. Like when I'm in the studio, I'm mostly just thinking like, does it slap for me? Is it good for me? And then I also trust that if I find something to be really cool, then there's a pretty good chance that a good percentage of the people watching it are also going to find it really cool. And I just have to be really honest with myself, like, is it actually really cool? Or do I have to do something cooler or better? But it's also, it's funny to use these words like cooler or better, or you know how art can be many things.
It's
but like,
a bit
is it a thing?
Yeah, I think we could unpack what cool means.
I'm not trying to be cool
No,
all the time. I'm on stage is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think I understand what you mean, that like you're looking for like a high quality of expression or something that's unique or interesting, and cool just kind of means like elevated in the aspects that you're hoping it to be.
And like rises above the threshold of being a thing in my brain. And I feel like I don't have a very esoteric taste for art myself.
Yeah.
I feel like if I find something really cool, I'm quite trusting that the audience will find it compelling as well. Yeah,
but you don't like think about a certain trick and be like, yeah, this was really cool and I like this, but is the audience gonna differentiate it from the last thing that I did? Like, that's not a process that you have.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, I do like try to make, like when I make juggling, obviously I know that a lot of people don't know juggling.
Yeah.
So I try to make juggling that's readable to non-jugglers.
Yeah.
Because juggling is it's perceived so differently if you're in it.
Yeah.
If you know what's happening and you can kind of comprehend the patterns and stuff, versus I feel like a lot of what kind of normal audience, non-juggler audiences perceive of a juggling act is mostly just like a vibe of the trick, or like a very like impression, because it's so fast, it's over quite soon, and especially with club juggling, that's like kind of dynamic and fast and stuff. So like if you do a trick, the most important thing about a trick is like, for example, if you do like a high throw or something, it's like, oh, it goes high and that feels like a certain way, and maybe like how it flows into the next thing. And like the nitty-gritty technical detail of that is kind of like not so important. And then that's why it's also like important for me to try to be intentional about what I want each trick in an act, for example, what is it that I want to express?
Yeah.
Or like what is the and not in like, oh, this is climate change or something like that, you know, like on a deep level or anything, but just like, do I want this to feel floaty and light, and then it gets like faster and intense, and then it like explodes, and maybe that's what I want to, like a dynamic is what I want to express, and then I just make sure that translates from my brain through the juggling to the audience.
And do you think that happens maybe more on the choreographical, rhythmical body level, like the readability of it?
Yeah, and then if you get too into the weeds about just like which juggling trick variation you're doing, it's easy to like get lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of don't really enjoy watching jugglers that do juggling for other jugglers. Like when I go to juggling festivals and I look at the juggling acts there, I can tell that they're like made for other jugglers. And it's like, wow, that's so nerdy, and it can be really cool, but also like this act sucks. Because there's no expressive range, or there's no dramaturgy, or there's what am I supposed to feel right now, except for like, that was a neat trick. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was gonna ask, you already said a couple of things like expressive range and dramaturgy, but what do you think are the things that kind of make it more legible? What are the aspects of juggling that will help it be just not for jugglers?
Well, there's a lot of like, I would say, like jugglers end up doing variations of a variations of a variation of some very specific trick, or like maybe, for example, doing like 4 different variations of a very similar trick because they want to like stay within a technical concept or something.
Yeah.
And then they don't maybe think about like, oh, are they different enough from each other? Mm-hmm. Or they don't think from which direction should this be looked at, or I don't know how to. What was the question?
I think you answered it. I think you answered it already kind of before when you were talking about like trying to make it legible for audiences.
Yeah.
And that it's not like that the way that you decide to choreograph your juggling is impacted by how do you think people will perceive them visually. But maybe it is more like a visual and a rhythmical question than it is like a technical question necessarily.
Or like the technique is what the expression is built on.
Yeah.
So that the technique is just like the foundation. You have this amount of tools when you have like a technical foundation.
Yeah.
And then you have like a freedom of expression when you have a lot of techniques
within
that
it.
you can draw from.
Yeah.
But then the act is, and the technique is really important because the technique kind of is the expression in the juggling act as well, or in the juggling show scene. But it's not, like what is being expressed might not be a specific trick of juggling, but like how the trick feels, or what's the dynamic of the trick, or you know, it's like, oh, he like keeps going really fast, and that's like so crazy. That's one dynamic, but then another can be like, it's the same technique, but then it's like, oh, it's slow and hypnotic because he stayed in it for such a long time.
Yeah, and that's where this kind of like juggling and moving, like you first said, one of the first things you said, that you kind of think that they're the same thing in a way. Or that they are like very strongly connected, juggling.
Yeah, they're definitely, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the presence of objects kind of, and then that you start from the direction of the object kind of like in terms of process changes everything a little bit, but still I feel like I definitely, for example, now when I work with Olli and he's a dancer, and we are like looking to do similar things with our technique. Like he's dancing, I'm juggling, and we're both like, we're trying to do a choreography that feels a certain way, and like gives, I don't know how to say it, like makes the audience feel a certain kind of way. Yeah.
This is really fun to talk to you about this in this more formal setting, because we're actually kind of running up on time, or we have like been speaking.
I got time. I don't care.
But this
Adam's editing, so I don't care.
This is the first time that this has happened to me, that I had questions that I didn't get to ask.
Oh, okay.
Like normally within the hour.
Try to be more concise.
No. Like I think it's a good thing, and I think actually a lot of them did get answered in the conversation. It's just
Yeah.
like the way that you answered was so robust that there was like a lot in there, so you could go in many different directions. But I think I want to ask you still to close kind of the same thing that I have been asking so far, which is maybe a more globally about the future and what do you think about, like, where do you hope that your practice as a juggler is gonna go or grow in relation to yourself, but maybe also relationship to the world, like what's happening in Finland, and what are like some of your dreams and visions for a future that's good for Onni Toivonen and his juggling practice?
That question, yeah, it kind of fucks me up a little bit because I feel like I spend so much time on thinking about how dark the future looks. Like I'm very doom and gloom when it comes to thinking about the future of anything in like 30 years or even less. You know, things are just in terms of like global politics are not feeling like very hopeful at the moment. And then I'm kind of on a very individual level, very happy about where I am and where I've gotten and where I'm going with my practice. And I have goals and I have things that I want to do within the field of circus art and art in general in Finland, and things that I hope to achieve. But it's kind of like it has a dissonance to how I feel about the future of the world in general, and then it's like it kind of hurts my brain to think about wanting those things, and if it's realistic or if then sometimes I'm like, oh, am I just not allowing myself to dream big because I'm like scared of the future, and like I don't want to, like I kind of prevent myself from achieving larger things because I'm like, well, it's gonna go to shit anyway. I don't know.
I totally get what you mean. I think a lot.
What was the question?
No,
again?
like no. You answered it again. I was asking about whether you had some kind of vision or what you're hoping from the future, and what I heard you say was that you are very content with where you are, and looking into the future with like a goal-oriented thing is not something that really fits your psyche right now, considering what the world is looking like.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I sometimes when I get really disheartened with the present of oh, we didn't get this grant, or oh, we still don't have operational funding and now we have to get the money from somewhere else, and I'm really stressed out and things are hard, I often remind myself that in the context of how messed up the world is right now, just getting to make art is a pretty big privilege.
Yeah.
And enjoying that right now, still today, we are in a moment where we get to have that we still get to dedicate so much of our life and our care to this one thing.
Yeah, and it's a tremendous privilege.
It is a tremendous privilege, and it may not be forever.
Yeah, exactly. And there's kind of like no reason to assume that it would be forever.
Yeah.
Or even it might be that it's kind of like a blip in the historical in history, that like, oh, there's this like publicly funded art thing where, you know, we can be like freelance artists or have a company and just focus on doing.
Like we have no
art.
idea if this is actually the golden age and things are just gonna keep getting worse from here.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we hope is not the case, but I think it's not a bad motivation to not keep striving like, oh, forever growth and we will always make more and bigger things, rather than being really grateful for what we have right now.
Yeah, and also like maybe focus on, or like when there's not so much resources, when there's not so much money, then how do we make sure that kind of the artistic achievements of Finnish circus art are not like that, the artistic level doesn't like get worse because we have less money to go around, or how to kind of like make the circus scene a bit recession proof or apocalypse proof.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool thing to think about, and I believe in circus in the way that it's a thing that like specific circus disciplines have existed forever, and they will continue to be. But it would be cool that even if things get like more tough and like things kind of contract, which is the natural, you know, sometimes things grow, sometimes they contract, blah blah blah, but we would still, like, the art form would continue to grow and get better, and the future generations would have like more tools, more inspiration to draw from. They would be more profound artists than we are, even if there's less money, even if there's kind of things going bad.
And I think you pointed out to me when I first pitched you the idea of this podcast, you were the first person who said, and then it'll be a time capsule. Yeah. That like if I remember that you said, if I could listen to Finnish circus artists 10 years ago speak about, like, I would love to hear that. And that,
or 20 or 30.
Maybe we can be like brave enough to assume that we are doing some apocalypse proofing right now. Like we are trying to constrain or capture something that isn't. But I love that idea. I think we should suggest it as some kind of like workshop theme or panel discussion. Like, how do we preserve this even if everything falls apart? Like, how do we actually make for a circus culture that is survivable through community, even if all the funding structures and even if everything collapses? Like, how do we, let's become preppers.
The community and solidarity are definitely the key words there. Nice. I think we can do it.
I think so too. I think so. I think it's kind of built into the way that we are made and how this art form is made, actually.
For sure. And to like it does give me comfort that, for example, theater is still a thing and was probably, like, even when there was like the Black Plague or something, and Shakespeare was alive at the time and the theaters were closed for 7 years or something crazy. And then, you know, Shakespeare is still, his legacy is still a thing. And like, you know, even during the Great Depression, there was great jugglers who were juggling for a living. And it's probably like less than if it hadn't been a Great Depression, but it's still like it survives and it goes on. And maybe that can happen even if we are having like harder economic times or harder times in the biosphere and whatnot. Then we can still kind of have circus in some form.
This is another thing that was a quote from Adam that I'm now going to misquote. That we just talked about, I think yesterday, about how do you sow seeds for trees that you know you will never sit in the shade of.
Oh, right.
I think it would be an interesting thing to talk about that with circus. Like, how do we right now impact things in a way that may not benefit us?
Yeah, worth a think.
I think that's a really nice note to end on. It's 50% hope and 50% doom and gloom.
That's a pretty good...
Which is a good ratio.
Yeah, that's great. Coming from me.
Thank you so much for coming to do this. I know that you're actually really, really busy right now and in the middle of a creation, so we don't take your time for granted. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for contributing to the... God damn it.
We gotta keep this.
Oh no.
That was so good. Well, it was... thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Great.